Thank you all for coming in and spending part of your valuable time in participating in this webinar with us. We've gotten quite a few pre-survey questions from people that we've shared with the panelists, and I'm going to go through the brief introductions for everybody right now. I'm Dean Holstrom. I am a 30-year California family law attorney, a certified family law specialist for the state bar. I've been married for 40 years. I have 4 adult children, 3 that are either lawyers or going to be lawyers soon. That's a good thing or a bad thing. But I also am a proud grandparent of 4 beautiful grandchildren. And our firm, Holstrom, Block & Parke, has approximately 20 attorneys out of Southern California, and 10 of those are certified family law specialists. But our speakers today are Ben Helfand, and Ben is a very successful business person and a loving husband and father. He's also a proud co-parent and co-author of a book called Our Happy Divorce, which I'll show you on camera. And it's a very well-received book that talks about the challenges and benefits of a wonderful co-parenting relationship in a blended family environment. And that's a good cue for what we're going to be talking about today, which is not just co-parenting. There's a lot involved with co-parenting, and we're going to talk most specifically about the co-parenting in the blended family environment. That involves obviously step parents, maybe obviously some step children perhaps, and even half children. And with all the labels we put on it, it is all under the banner of blended families and all of the challenges and benefits among them. Naja Hall is an entrepreneur and stepmom. She's a blogger, a podcaster, and a social influencer. Naja has created VIP Stepmom and Blended in Black, and is a very active coach for parents in a blended family environment, step parents in the same environment. And in fact, that's what VIP Stepmom is about coaching. And one of the things I'm going to ask you about when I get to you, Naja, we're not going to go through all 25 commandments, but those 25 commandments for the partner of the stepmom. So, all right, we'll get to that. Stephen Nixon. Stephen is a creator, he's a lawyer, an entrepreneur, and he's identified a need in the family law environment that is both part of the legal system and the social structure of blended families and co-parenting. And that is, how do you communicate in an appropriate manner to facilitate the best co-parenting relationship for the ultimate, which is the best interest of the children? And as a litigator, how do you track the communications of the parents to ensure that that they're behaving in an appropriate manner? And this is not about rules or supervision or anything. It's about helping people train themselves that their words and the methodology of communication can have a positive effect on their children or a negative effect on their children. And so that's part of what Stephen's going to be talking about in his role with Talking Parents and that platform for co-parenting and blended family communication. Then we have Kristen Holstrom, and Kristen Holstrom is a 10-year certified specialist in family law, mother of 3, assistant managing partner at Holstrom, Block & Parke, and the founding member and managing partner of Custody Queens. Custody Queens has a radio show on Go Country FM, and I believe it's also broadcast on the web as well. Kristen will talk about that when we get there. Erin Grimes is behind my microphone, so I didn't see her. Erin is the psychologist in the group, and Erin's going to give you the perspective from a psychological perspective, both for children, parents, and step parents. And we're all going to talk about the do's and don'ts, again, the context of what is best for the kids. And if you're in a litigation case, what is the best way to de-escalate hostilities for you to be a better parent, and then for you to also do better in your case, if that's the case. Erin has a practice in North San Diego County, and where she does both clinical psychology as well as forensic work within the family law context in blended families, and is something of an authority there in that neck of the woods, which is of course where we practice as well. There's going to be a series of disclaimers that go, and I want everybody to understand, first off, we cannot talk about specific cases, contexts, situations. That's not what this is about. This is informational for all of you. And if you have an active legal case, you should make sure that you contact your own legal professional to get your information. All right, Ben, I'll give you a softball here to get you warmed up. What are your, I'm going to go with your don'ts first. What are your don'ts in a co-parenting and a blended family environment?
First of all, thank you for having me on. I am a little embarrassed because I've spent so much of this COVID process of getting my studio right and everything. And of course, when I do this webinar, everything goes to hell. So I'm on my iPad now, and I apologize about that, but I don't know what happened, but we'll figure it out.
That's so life. You're good, man.
Yeah, it's, I guess, technology, right? Yeah. I think it's good to start with the don'ts, and I don't have many don'ts compared to my do's, but the one that's a simple don't for us was just simply don't weaponize your children. They had no choice in any decision along the way for you guys to get married, or for Nikki and I to, I'll talk for ourselves, for Nikki and I to get married, for Nikki and I to have him, or for Nikki and I to get a divorce. So we didn't want to stick him with the emotional bill of our decisions. The idea, and the other thing is the idea that kids are resilient and they'll get over it, is BS. And you could take it from me, and part of my story is that my parents had a very high conflict divorce. And I think sometimes that my parents used it as justification for their behaviors. And as much as you are resentful and angry at your ex, I think it's undeniable that you both love your kids. And don't be fooled. So another don't be fooled to believe that anyone else loves your kids as much as your parents do. Your lawyers, your therapist, your coach, even your family and friends will never love your kids as much as you as parents do. So don't make decisions on what's best for them based on their interests, because they don't align with yours.
Now, let me transition to your experience, because that's what resulted in you and Nikki, your former partner and co-parent, to jointly create this book called Our Happy Divorce, based upon your experiences. And you obviously gained a lot of insights going through the process. Can you share that goal, which is the blended family, where this child or children are all sharing two loving homes, where they are equally loved and supported with a cooperative methodology, regardless of which home they're in? Is that, you would agree that that's the goal?
That was the goal. Well, the goal from the beginning was always to put Asher first, right? And to not, that's our son's name, obviously, but to not stick him with this emotional bill. And so I think it gets used a lot, right? And everybody, like I said, loves their kids and wants to do best for their kids, and put their kids first. But sometimes the ego gets in the way, right? And sometimes the ego is cunning, baffling, and powerful, and will convince you on something that's not really there. So Nikki and I, obviously our North Star was what's best for Asher. But then we took it one step further, and we all learn about 2 + 2 = 4. Now in a divorce, there are certain decisions that you ask Nikki, you ask me, and you would ask Asher what the answer was, and we'd get 3 different answers. But whenever the answer was 4 for Asher, that's the one we went with. And so that was the goal. If you had told us 13 years ago that our life would be like it is today, and we'd be writing a book about, called Our Happy Divorce, we would have told you you're out of your mind. And so that's the important thing to also realize, is that this is a process. This was, we overshot our goal by a mile, but it was because we put our kids first, or put our son first, and then everything else sort of fell into place.
Unmute Naja, please. Okay, I'm going to go to Naja for a second. Naja, you hear what Ben's talking about from his personal perspective. Now, I know you have VIP stepmoms as one of your coaching programs, and how does what Ben had to say about the process, how it started, and you never would have imagined they would have been able to fashion something so wonderful. I know you've had similar experiences, because I saw on your web pages that there was a couple that went out and had lunch after their divorce was granted, literally the same day. There was a picture there. I didn't notice that they were having alcohol. I'm guessing perhaps not, but that was a great story similar in a microcosm of what Ben's talking about. So
Yeah.
what do you do with your stepmoms that you're coaching to help them be better in that role?
Well, first, just to address everything that Ben said, Ben, that was like music to my ears. If only every family and every divorced couple could be like you and Nikki. The reason that I started my entire platform is because my experience was the opposite. I got in a relationship with a person who had a very high conflict divorce, and it not only spilled over into the children's lives, but everything else, in everybody in my family's lives as well. And to mention that post, yeah, that happy couple was very honest, brutally honest. It was almost too much. The article that you're referencing. When they left divorce court, I think they decided to sit down and have their own debriefing. And one thing that they mentioned is there's nobody that cares more about your kid than that other person, the person that you created the child with, not your attorney, not the judge, not even your family and friends. And so what that particular couple decided to do together is, and it's so cliche because everybody said it, it says it, is to keep the kid first. And what that meant is to make sure that they kept up a united front and they worked on their own particular issues. They didn't bring the kid into the crap, and they had a child-centered divorce. Now, and you guys are family law attorneys, you're a firm. Everybody on here has seen child-centered divorces work. I've never seen a child-centered marriage work. So, at least those people that you're referencing, and you especially, Ben, you guys were able to focus on what's most important is the kids.
Well, and that's a great point. And Ben, we were talking the other day, and you were sharing an experience you had where your son was going fishing with his stepdad, and you actually, and it's been a lot of years, and notwithstanding that, and all the effort and the awareness that you have, you still had that instinctive reaction that kind of your feelings were a little hurt that your son was having a good time with his stepdad. Tell us about that.
Well, I think that's, to speak to the point about the ego. And the ego is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And even today, it gets in the way of my decision making. And 14 years later, I love Chad, Nikki's husband. We're close friends. We usually go fishing, but on this particular time, I wasn't invited, right? So, of course, the first reaction was like, ooh, another guy who just happens to be his second dad taking my son fishing. As good as our world is, we wrote a book, it's called Our Happy Divorce, it's still the first initial response like, ooh, that stung. But because of practice and because of this road, it's gotten a little bit easier to go back to that 2 + 2 = 4. And for him to go with his stepdad might not equal 4 for me, but it definitely equals 4 for Asher, that he has another man in his life who loves him as much as I do. And I just want to go back to one quick thing that Naja said that was so important that we, as far as the do, and that is what Nikki and I did going back is the most important step is we took a break. We took a pause. We hit the pause button before we dealt with what basically is a business decision, a business deal, and that's a divorce settlement. But it's wrapped up and it's sprinkled with miracle grow of emotions. And no business decision, no good life decision has ever made sense when those two are mixed together.
Would you agree, Ben, that probably the most important factor personally is to own your own emotions, and each of you as a parent has to put the interest of your child's well-being ahead of your own emotional needs?
It's number 2 on my list, Dane. Accountability and responsibility for your behaviors. And that's part of the pause button that Nikki and I took as we dealt with our own stuff. And for the first time in the 15 years we knew each other, we weren't pointing the finger saying it was the other person's fault. We went through a process where we looked at each other's, as in my side of the street, she looked at her side of the street, and she wasn't on my side of the street, so I had to clean it up. And that was the accountability and the forgiveness was definitely a big part of it.
Oh, awesome. Thank you very much, Ben. Stephen, you under the creation of Talking Parents, where did that come from? You were a family law lawyer. Where did the genesis of Talking Parents come from?
When I started practicing family law, I started noticing that pretty much all of my clients would come in and they had a lot of the same stories. And you would see that especially with the clients that were coming back to court over and over again on different issues that would pop up every so often, and they would go back to court and they would come in to see their attorney, and they would always begin to tell us about their
Sorry, Stephen, did you just blink out there? No?
and
All right. And go ahead.
And they would come in there and they would explain the very poor communication. And I could tell that the issues that they were having were due to these poor communications. And I would ask the clients to, well, bring me in these things, bring me these messages, bring me the text messages, the emails, the Facebook printouts, because I need to see them as your attorney. And that would take them a great deal of time to pull together, and they would bring it to me and we'd look through it. And what became apparent is that it was just terrible communication. They weren't cooperating. They weren't resolving anything on their own. They were having disagreements, and then they were ending up back in court, back in their attorney's office. And you start to wonder, is the record that I'm compiling here of all these things bad because their communication is bad, or is their communication bad because they don't have a better way to communicate with each other, because they don't have a single reliable place where they can talk to each other and where they can share these things and build a good record. And so as an attorney, I wanted to have a useful record in court. I didn't want to have to spend so much time going through these messy stacks, and I didn't want to waste so much time in court and so much of my clients' money litigating these matters when we weren't accomplishing much with these bad records. But the flip side of that is that by giving parents a service like Talking Parents, where they can get together and communicate and share items and even talk over the phone, we could compile a good record of everything that they were saying to each other and everything that they were doing. But that would have the follow-on effects of encouraging parents to take these communications more seriously. When they knew that there was going to be a good, complete record that would be useful in court, then they would think twice before they would post messages to each other, before they would share things, and they would think deeply about what they were doing on the service. And that created an accountability that therefore encouraged parents to take these things more seriously and to try and resolve more matters on their own. And so what you found is that even though Talking Parents came from a place from me as an attorney wanting to make my job easier, make my life easier as a lawyer, what it's ultimately done is given parents the tool that they need to communicate more effectively, resolve more matters on their own, save themselves money and time. And then by doing all of that, you're also lowering the stress levels of the parents. And as we all know, when the parent stress level gets lower, the child's stress level gets lower, and everybody lives a better life. And for me, I'm a co-parent, and I'm in a blended family situation myself. So this webinar and this subject is very personal to me, and then obviously with what I do for a living.
Stephen, first off, a question for the attending audience, because they may or may not be familiar with Talking Parents or other platforms. Does your company, do you regulate the content? Do you view content or anything like that?
We do not. Talking Parents is an open tool for parents to utilize however they see fit for the particular circumstances of their relationship. It's also a tool that can be utilized by lawyers and by courts, that can be made an integral part of an agreement between parents or part of a court order, sometimes ordering them to use the service. And those agreements and those orders can set boundaries, can set limits on how the service is to be used, when it's to be used. But as far as the tool itself goes, we encourage parents to be creative and to use it however best fits their case or circumstance.
All right, so it's a great tool. Are there programs out there for coaching? I see, here comes Nadia back. Okay, so if there are programs out there for coaching people on how to use, whether you're using a text message or you're using an email or any other thing that documents your communication. The benefit, I love Talking Parents because the benefit is that you get a string of the entire history of the communication. But is there a coaching program that allows parents to learn how their words may not be the best choice of communication? And I saw Kristen raising her hand, so I'm going to let her jump in on that one real quick. Can you unmute?
So one of the great things about Talking Parents is that you can also see when somebody has checked a message. So when you're going through a court process, communication is one of the most important things, especially with a blended family. There's so many different rules. You have parents, you have soccer practice, you have report cards, especially with everything being virtual now. One of the best features of Talking Parents as a platform, it allows each of you to take a pause, write a message coming from a child-centered approach, and it takes time to get there. But once you get there, it's a very, very interactive platform. It allows you to post report cards, let the other parent or even a third party know if there's a parent-teacher conference, if there's a minimum day, if soccer practice is canceled. And it really, if you embrace the program and the platform, it provides so many elements that allow a blended family to actually work together. But it's really meant for the parents, but you can involve third parties.
All right, let me go to Naja, because the question I was trying to ask, and I didn't do a good job of it, is this one. We can all look at it historically and say, wow, maybe you phrased that a little bit aggressively, or what I've seen in my practice is accusatorily. In other words, it's one thing to say, hey, I noticed that little Johnny showed up after his time with you with a new bruise on his knee, and I'm not sure what happened, and he doesn't know what happened. Can you shed a light on it? As opposed to what we see as lawyers. What did you do? You're a horrible, negligent parent. You can't take care of your own child. Okay? And is that stark contrast in co-parenting? And that can be compounded or ameliorated by a new significant other who it can either, in my experience, be the peacekeeper and to some degree a mediator, which puts a lot of burden on them, or they can be what I call the arsonist, which is they're going out setting fires to try to create conflict in the parenting environment. So what's your experience tell you about how you can learn as a parent to de-escalate as opposed to escalating situations?
So when you asked me to put together a list of do's and don'ts, here's my do's, here's my don'ts. So one of the things that I recommend to de-escalate is, as one of my favorite linguists in the world, a guy named Ice Cube says, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. And what that means is check your emotions at the door. Now, one thing that I have learned is a lot of people are unable. They just don't have the ability to take a pause, take a beat, as you said, check their impulses, check their egos, as Ben said, and then respond. But that's something that you practice. And you were asking, are there different programs out there? There's tons of programs out there to teach people how to be better. I mean, first and foremost, you got anger management. You can hire a master step family coach like me. If you want to litigate, then you get your attorney, but that's going to cost you a lot more in billable hours. But as far as finding a common ground, you got to learn to check your emotions. I deal with people that have to deal with people that are not interested in checking their emotions, and they don't know how. And so if you are a person on the receiving end of a person that's extremely high conflict, and they just don't want to try to get along with you, then yeah, you do have to go get it ordered, that you're using some sort of co-parenting app. You do have to make sure that you don't respond to this person out of emotion. You don't have to match them at their level. You ignore them, for goodness sake. So if you're the person in your scenario who can be deemed having the most control, then use your control wisely.
All right. Hey, Aaron, let me go to you on that. That was a great one about being responsible for your own emotions. Number one, don't let somebody push your buttons and provoke you to doing something that is equally harmful to your child, to either to your children or to the co-parenting arrangement, or to both. What are your thoughts on that?
I think those are great ideas, and it's absolutely true. I think everyone who's spoken today has brought up, the central factor of, hey, what is in the best interest of the child? And keeping the parents' emotions in check is key to that. So I always encourage the parent to ask, hey, what is my goal here? What's my intention here? And if the goal or intention is not about the best interest of the child, but has to do with anger or spite, that's a check-in, reset, and let me reevaluate before I act upon it. And so, for instance, an example of maybe a co-parenting in a blended family situation would be, hey, I'm going to try and really force this stepchild of mine to like me right away. to accept me right away. And that might be more out of the step parent's personal need to be liked and to be loved, but is that the best interest of the child? When we know that merging a blended family, you know, can take time and it takes patience.
It does, absolutely. Back to Stephen. Stephen, your program is available in what form? Do you download it? Do you have to have a court order for it? How does it work?
You know, it's really a complete platform. You can access it via any web browser. So you can just open a browser and go to talkingparents.com. You can sign up there and you can use the service right there on your web browser. You can use it on your computer. You can use it on the browser on a phone. It'll work on any browser, on any internet connected device. It's also available as a standalone app for iPhone and Android too. So we're kind of across all of those platforms. And then, no, you do not have to have a court order to use it. You know, a lot of our parents are court ordered to use the service, especially you see a lot in like criminal cases and domestic violence cases. And then in the really high conflict divorce cases, people will be ordered to use the service. But parents can absolutely just sign up and use it on their own. And many of our users do exactly that because.
All right, we just lost Stephen's internet. We just blinked out, and I'm sure he'll be back. Ah, Stephen, you're back.
But in any event, a lot of parents do choose to use the service entirely on their own. And even if they haven't been ordered to use it, and even if it's not an extremely high conflict case, even when you have parents who get along really well, it's still very convenient for them to have one central location to keep all of these important conversations, keep all of these interactions and calendars. You can make phone calls through the service that get recorded and get logged. You know, in addition to showing when somebody views a new message or views a new calendar event, we also log all the edits. So if the other parent is changing calendar events at the last second or removing that, you actually have a record of all of that as well. So that's not something you get somewhere else. And like I was saying, even when parents are currently getting along and communicating effectively, you know, we all know that over time things change, especially when new significant others come on the scene, when one parent needs to relocate. Things that maybe they let slide at one point are now becoming an issue, and now they're bringing them up. And so even parents who have not been court ordered to use the service and who just use it on their own, they're doing it because they know that down the road, in addition to taking a lot of those headaches away while they're communicating, if anything does come up, it's going to save them a lot of time and probably a lot of money in the future to resolve any problems that do come up.
Okay. Do you have any personal observations or feedback in using Talking Parents or other programs in a blended family environment? In other words, are the stepmom and stepdad invited to participate? That's the first angle.
You know, for us, we don't set a lot of rules on how people use it. You know, we've had people who share accounts in blended situations. We have a lot of blended situations where the step parent may create their own account to be tied to an account with a biological parent. You know, as far as we're concerned, people can utilize the service however they want to for their personal relationship and their personal case, you know, and, you know, we don't set a lot of rules there, and people can use our service to maybe get themselves in trouble or to do something they shouldn't have done. But more often than not, our hope is that it's going to encourage them to be more civil and to be more professional in their communications and to leave out some of those little extra things that they just don't need to put into those communications. You don't need to write.
We call those hand grenades, yeah.
Right. You don't need to write in there, hey, I know you hate being on time for anything, but could you please be there at 7 to pick up our kid? You don't need that part. You just need to keep it professional and stick to the facts. And you've always got a task that you're trying to complete. You have a goal.
Yeah, and Kristen, for you, one of the key things that I've seen, and I don't know if you've seen the same thing in your career, is that the more respect you show the other parent, the better the relationship the child is going to have with both of you. Your thoughts?
100%. I think one of the biggest do's in this whole topic that we're talking about is if parents can actually communicate effectively, respectfully, and civil, and start communicating themselves without placing blame and being anger, using the children as messengers, using the children to make comments about, you know, somebody's new partner or spouse. Once that is eliminated and that emotional aspect is removed from a custody case or a family law case, it's a game changer. And I think that the children see it. They don't hear one party talking about the other. They're not caught in the middle. And when the parents can effectively communicate, it truly is a game changer. And that's where I see my cases go from setting for trial to settlement. And it really comes, it takes time, and you have to lose the resentment and the emotional aspect. But once it happens, it is a complete game changer, and your children will become different children because they see you and third parties and spouses and partners communicate effectively.
Okay, so that's a common theme. We heard Ben talking about his big don't weaponize the children. And if I could incorporate, Stephen's concept of the communication and keeping it professional, is that an underlying thought that which is good for the parent of my child is good for my child. Okay, whether or not I'm in love with that person or if I despise them, I still value them as the parent of my child. And as such, I realize that that is important to my child. And therefore, if you have a new significant other in the picture and you say, that person is also important to somebody that's important to my child, and you keep coming from what is important to my child, then that really keeps your mind focused on how should I react in this situation. Doesn't mean you're a doormat, doesn't mean you exceed the demands of somebody who's being unreasonable. It means that you always come from a child-centered place when you're making the decisions and communicating. Ben, do you agree with that?
I do, and that's the do on mine, and that comes to accountability, right? I mean, I think at the end of the day, just because you ended your vows to your wife, which unfortunately happens a lot in this country, I don't think it's okay to ever end your vows that you inherently take when you become a parent, right? And that's the thing that this 2+2 thing is even today, and the idea that this is a process, right? That Nikki and I there are tons of landmines even after we started doing, I love this story about the coffee, like we started just doing little things like that just to try to see if we could do it, right? And then it became this process, but always putting Asher first. And Nikki, perfect example of this, is she sort of knew what kind of single guy I was going to be, let's just say, right? And sort of sow my wild oats. And she said to me, I just ask that you don't bring anybody around Asher until you're absolutely sure that she is going to be in your life. First reaction, ego. Who the hell are you to tell me who I can and can't bring around my child, right? That person didn't speak, thank God. I took a breath. I literally had to do this what's best for Asher thing in my head. And then I said, you know what? She's right. At the end of the day, if I don't, if what she was asking me was absolutely reasonable, because it's not good for him to have this revolving door of these women I was dating. And so, I didn't introduce him to my wife for a year until I was absolutely sure that, so your job as a parent does not ever end, even when you get divorced. And I think sometimes that, like I said, they get weaponized and they get put in the middle of something they have no business being in the middle of, and they can't afford the emotional bill.
I'm going to go to Erin in just a second, because that was one of the things that she and I spent quite a bit of talking about is introducing a new significant other and how to do it in an appropriate manner. That is, again, child-centered. But before I do that, I've been seeing a lot of the questions and things coming up from the audience, and there's a lot of really, frankly, gut-wrenching stories. And what I do for a living for 30 years is I deal with this stuff. And boy, hearing that, some of the heartache and pains, one of the more common themes that we hear as family law lawyers is, yeah, but you don't understand who I'm dealing with. Okay, trust me. Yes, you're right. We don't know who you personally are dealing with, but we have virtually seen it all. And I don't mean virtually in the COVID sense, but we've dealt with a lot of personalities in litigation and in mediation and in a variety of contexts. And really, what you can do, number one, your attorneys are out there to help you protect your interest. But it is my hope and desire that they are also there to counsel you. That's what lawyers are supposed to do, is advise you. And that doesn't mean convince you that you're wrong or right or anything else. It means give you the best advice they can. And sometimes that advice is look at it a different way. And most importantly, be responsible for your side of the street, as was just said earlier, okay? Be responsible for what you do. You are not responsible for what somebody else does, but you can certainly make it worse for your child. Okay, so focus on that. Erin, to you, introducing a new significant other. I mean, I've had cases over my career where somebody would move, dad would move out on Thursday, and Thursday evening there was a new guy in the house. Okay, so I'm guessing that's not a good thing to do from a child-centered perspective. Your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly right, Jane. It's way too fast. Same week. The kids are still adjusting just to the grief associated with the divorce. I talked to you guys, everyone here on the panel, about divorce being like grief and like a death. It takes time. You go through stages and phases of emotion, so it's too quick. And you know, the obvious problem there too is that's meeting the needs of the mom or the dad to bring the boyfriend or girlfriend in right away. And I even recommend to a lot of my clients, you know, take a pause. I think someone said here, maybe Ben said it. You have to take a little bit of a break, even in your dating life, before you can really be fully prepared to date and know what you want in a relationship after a divorce. So a lot of reasons that would be too quick and not good for the child.
Okay. What about, is it something that you should approach, like in Ben's situation? She actually came to him, and his reaction was textbook for what I would have expected in my experience, with the exception of the left turn, which was, okay, you know, who's this person telling me what to do? But then having the sense of awareness to say, okay, well, there's a good point there. So now you're saying it, and you're a neutral observer. You're not involved in their relationship, but you're saying, hey, you need to look at how the child perceives this. So talk a little bit more, if you would, about the grieving process. Not only a parent goes through, but the child goes through in the separation of parents.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as a neutral party, as well as, you know, an expert in the field, I like the neutrality as well of talking parents, because when you can bring the two parents together to talk about difficult issues that might trigger ego issues, but they can talk either through talking parents or in a therapy office like mine, it's a great thing, because a lot can be accomplished. So, you know, first is just having compassion for the children, about the sense that, hey, I lost the home I used to know, and the home used to be their biological mom and dad. I lost that continuity of routine. I didn't have to switch houses. I knew that when I came home, they were going to, you know, my things were going to be in one place. I work with the kids on kind of that shock, maybe mix of sadness and anger initially. And then goal for both the parents and the children is to getting to a place of acceptance and letting go. And that really varies from person to person, how quickly you can get there. But I talk a lot about acceptance and surrender and letting go as, ironically, a way to take some control back into your life. And that can be very empowering for both the kids and the couple who divorced, who are feeling a lot of lack of control or desperation or hopelessness. So that's my approach to the grief side of divorce for both the kids and the parents.
All right. And so basically what I hear you saying is that we should be allowing the kids to go through this grieving process before they can evolve into including new significant others of their parents, which become directly new significant people in their own child lives. Is that a fair statement?
That's accurate. Yep.
Okay. All right. Dr. Grimes, what are your do's in a blended co-parenting situation?
Okay, so some do's for the step parent primarily: be patient. You know, start to reach out to the child, not for your own needs, but to let that child know that you're there and that you want to get to know the child. So that can be quality time, engaging with them on activities they like. But at the same time, a don't would be don't push it in that area. And sometimes I even see step parents competing with their own new husband for time with the stepchild. So don't compete with your new husband or with the bio parent, because children are smart and they see that. As well as when you blend a family, everyone has less time together, ironically. So a lot of times the siblings and the parents and the kids will all want more time together because they have a little bit of less time together. And so people can get competitive, and that will really backfire.
All right,
A key aspect.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Just a final key aspect, I think, for every step parent to step in and say, I will never replace your father. Your father will always be your father. Same thing goes for the mother. That takes a lot of anxiety away from two folks. It takes the anxiety away from the stepchild, as well as indirectly the anxiety away from the bio dad, because that will often be communicated either via child or even the new step parent. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that stepdad isn't trying to play dad or take my role. And that decrease in anxiety for both the bio parent as well as the child is tremendous.
Okay. Kristen, there's a question about authority and boundaries. And sometimes they're the same thing and sometimes they're completely different. One of the questions we saw from an attendee was, who has the legal authority to make decisions for a child? And that may be one answer, but then aren't the boundaries of who makes authority or decisions about a child, aren't they really dependent upon the circumstances of the blended family?
Yeah, it's kind of a loaded question, I guess, with respect to who legally has the ability to make, who has the authority to make decisions for the child. I guess the first question I would have is whether the court has made orders or not. Generally, that is limited on or dependent on whether the court has made an order for joint legal custody or sole legal custody. But if there are no orders, it's generally up to the parents. And I think one of the biggest things that a blended family can do to have success is for everyone to understand their roles and the boundaries, and for the step parents or the partners or even the girlfriend or boyfriend to respect the parents' roles. And it all starts with the introduction. And I think if the introduction is done in an appropriate and respectful and safe manner where the child doesn't feel like someone is trying to replace their mom and dad, that's where this all starts. And I think that if the child sees that mom is okay with this new person or that dad is okay with this new person, that's the first step. And then with respect to your question as boundaries, it's really when you're coming in as a new partner or a spouse, you have to respect that unit between the parent and the children. That's the primary boundary. And then your role is going to change over time. If you've been around for 3 months, you've been around for 10 years. Let's get real. I mean, I'm a mom of 3 and I've been married for 14 years. Parenting is tough between 2 people that are married. So when you start adding all of these other people, it takes time. It is a process. Do not expect something to change overnight. It takes time.
Dave, you're muted.
Thank you. I'll try to remember what I said a few seconds ago. For those of you who couldn't read my lips. So Naja, and also playing on something that Kristen and Aaron said, and that is that specifically, you said something on one of your sites, as I recall, is that I'm not going anywhere and she's not going anywhere. Okay, so that, in other words, you're both in it for the long haul, and that's the way both people should approach it. Okay, and that also goes to Dr. Grimes' comments relative to be patient. Okay, and Kristen's comment about, hey, your role in this child's life, if you've been around 10 years, is going to be one thing. Your role in the child's life, if you've only been around a few months, is different. It takes time, and that really has to evolve. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I wrote a whole book on it. It's called Girl Bye, She's Not Going Anywhere, and Neither Are You. My intention was to speak to both biological parents, mainly mothers, and stepmothers, in teaching them how to rehumanize one another, how to find their individual lanes. And this is tough because as a mother, your ego says, I don't have a lane with my child. Everything's my lane. But when your child lives in another house half the time or even every other weekend, you don't have a place there. So I see a lot of mothers coming in trying to dictate what happens in a space where their child lives, and seeing them kind of in an unhealthy way enmeshing themselves in this child's life and not allowing a healthy blending to happen. And to your other point, modern psychology, all the websites, google.com tells us that it takes the average family about 5 to 7 years to fully blend, when in fact, most really don't blend. They kind of just figure out how to coexist and tolerate one another. And I forgot the last thing that you said, because you said like 5 things at once, Dan.
That's okay. You did too. We're good. All right.
You got me.
Okay. Kristen, back to we were talking about authorities and roles. In my experience, there's been times when a step parent, as I talked earlier about, can be a facilitator of communication, or they can be an obstructionist of communication. Your thoughts and experiences on how you avoid those traps as either a parent or a step parent.
So as a step parent, I would try to build my relationship with the children and being respectful of how long I've been around, what the dynamics are, but also know that I shouldn't be making any real decisions. I can make suggestions. I can build that relationship between myself and the child, but it really is just kind of, it should happen organically, but you should not be making any decisions. You should never be speaking negatively about the other parent. I mean, a perfect example is stepmom's having a conversation with the child, and she picks, she does the transportation, which probably is a no-no to start with. That's usually where arson can happen at transportation exchanges with third parties, where they're not ready for that added level of communication. And someone makes a comment like, "What is your mom wearing?" That's a perfect example that just shouldn't happen in front of the child. It's disrespectful, it's unnecessary, but now you're putting that child in a place that they're likely going to tell the other parent, or they're going to feel like they should have the same thoughts as a step parent. So for the step parent, I would really, just like Dr. Grimes said, is ease into that role and let it happen organically, but don't try to make any decisions. Don't try to, one time, I think it came up in a discussion I had that, one of the step parents was sending Amazon gifts to the child's house like every day to try to create that artificial bond. And it not only pissed off the bio parent, but at the same time, it just created an awkward feeling between the child, and it was trying to buy the love. And I don't think that that's appropriate.
Dr. Grimes, one of the things that we've touched upon is we've been kind of focusing on the child or children of the divorce. Well, oftentimes in blended families, there are 2 sets of kids coming in, one from the father, one from the mother, and there may be a 3rd set of kids that are created during this relationship. So from the child's perspective, it would seem that having the ability to focus on each child as opposed to compartmentalizing them like I just did, okay, and giving quality time and attention to each child is critical to making the whole blended family thing work. Otherwise, the children themselves are not going to be able to feel good in this environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, for step siblings to develop a relationship, it's different than a step parent and a stepchild, but the same, hallmark tips in terms of not rushing it, not forcing it, giving the family of origin or the bio family, some space and some ability to be together is important. There's a lot of factors that go into accepting new step siblings. Sometimes the kids don't have things in common. Sometimes the age gap is big. Sometimes custody schedules are different. And so then the time issue becomes even more of a problem, because the parents are already sharing time, and then they have to share more time with step siblings. So making sure that bio dad and bio mom prioritize the needs of their child is key.
All right, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to invite all of the panelists. I know I'm going to go back to Naja right now because I know she wanted to say something. I encourage you all, if you've got something you'd like to say and I'm not seeing it on the chat bar, just throw up your hand and we'll go right to you. Okay, go ahead, Naja.
I just want to throw this in there for people that are step parents, or you're entering a step parenting type role and you just don't know what to do. We know that it can be awkward for you as well, but when in doubt, just pretend like you're the cool auntie or uncle. You don't have to go overboard. You don't have to be a yes man or a yes woman for the child. You are definitely not a babysitter or a servant to the original family, but just be cool, and when in doubt, just please do that.
Okay. And did we get you, Kristen, go ahead.
I was just saying, children replicate our actions, and Naja's right, and Dr. Grimes is right, and I think every one of the panelists has touched on it. But children, they replicate our actions. So if the parents teach the children that it's okay to communicate and like the new partner, the new spouse, it's going to happen a lot more organically.
Okay.
Can I also just add about the, and I'm going to just speak for my kid, and Dr. Grimes can maybe speak for kids in general, but at least my son, Asher, was a lot smarter than we gave him credit for. And you know, I had said that I had waited a year to introduce Nadia to Asher, and then they started getting together. But I also communicated with Nikki about the process of how we were going to do it. And then it was a while before Nikki and Nadia met. And one night I was putting Asher to bed, and I always called Nikki to let her speak to him. And he was 4 or 5 years old. And he said, "Hey, Mom, have you met Nadia yet?" And if I could take a picture, I wish I had this picture framed of Nadia's face, because they hadn't met yet. But it was Asher's, you know, way of saying, "I know this woman's important in Mom's world, in my dad's world, and it's time for Mom and Nadia to meet." And so he did it at his schedule at 6 years old. And, you know, here we are trying to think we're pulling the wool over kids or whatever. And it was just, you know, he said when he was ready for when it was time for them to meet.
That's awesome. And one thing I want to point out to everybody is it is not normal for divorce attorneys to hear a client say that I have him call his mother every night. Okay. That is unusual. I applaud that as a human being, as a father, and as a divorce attorney. Okay. That is such a cool thing to do. Go ahead, Ben.
Okay, well, let me just play that. It wasn't out of because I'm such a good person. It was in the beginning. It was I was faking it until I made it.
And there you go. See, that's exactly right. That's where Talking Parents comes in with Stephen. It's learning how to walk the walk. Learn it, and then suddenly the walk becomes second nature. Okay, I
check your
strive
ego and just fake it till you make it. That's the secret of our happy divorce.
And I strive to. I tell parents, I say the goal here for most parents is that you get orders. Okay, you take your orders, you throw them in a drawer, and you know what? You do what's best for the child from there on. Okay, you got something to fall back on if there's ever any kind of a conflict or a problem, but you're not stuck with that. You adapt. You do what's best for the child, and you do it because you're a good parent. Period. So that's my thought on it. Kristen, you have any additional thoughts on that?
No, I think you covered it, but I think the secret to being a good attorney is faking it until you make it too. I think that's just, you know, I think it's the evolution of anything that you're good at. It's not natural starting anything new, coming in as a step parent. I've watched my best friend evolve through this process, and she has been phenomenal. And she's actually taught me things as a family law attorney being in that role. So it's just a process, but once Dave's right, once you do it so many times, you don't even think about faking it anymore. It's become part of who you are and what you want to teach your kids.
Awesome. Kristen, what are your do's and don'ts in a blended family?
I think we've covered them all. I mean, my number one was do communicate effectively. Do not place blame. Do not use the children as weapons. Do parent from a child-centered approach. Being a parent is one of the most selfless jobs on the planet. You cannot be selfish. Because if you are selfish, you would get everything you need done for yourself, but that's not what your kids need. So you really have to, before you send a message, before you send a text, before you say a hateful thing, think about it. It's kind of like putting things in your cart at Target. Do you really need it? You know, and then you make that decision. And if you do that on Talking Parents, and I am a big fan of Talking Parents, so one of my do's is to use a co-parenting platform. But I think it's important. It's really important. And I think if you, and also do have the initial blended family introduction done in a healthy way, whether that's with a mental health professional, whether that's at a restaurant or a Starbucks, and do it with the right amount of time and make it happen organically.
Okay, here's a point. I think this could be out to anybody who's seen communications that are inappropriate, either by email or text message or whatever. When I say inappropriate, I mean inappropriate in a co-parenting context. They are inflammatory, they're accusatory, they are hostile, whatever. For those of us who have seen that, how do you, and probably Naj is a great one for this one too, because she actually physically coaches people on this stuff. And of course, Dr. Grimes counsels people about these kind of things from that, her capacity. So any one of you just kind of start talking about how do you train somebody to get out of their own way by not sabotaging what's going on by what's coming out of their mouth.
You know, I once asked my husband when we were in the midst of conflict and it just was a conundrum. I said, how do you read through 50 million words and you still respond in such a positive way? And he was like, I kind of view it as sifting through trash to find the gold. He was like, I read everything and the gold is those things that are about my children and concerning the children. And all the other stuff, I throw it away. I toss it because I realize it's not helpful to me, to them, or to the situation. And I simply respond to that. So if you are a person that is on the receiving end of the trash surrounded by gold, make sure you just pick out and respond to the tidbits that are most important. Understand that it's probably not personal. How this person is treating you and speaking to you is not a reflection of who you are. It's just a reflection of what they're going through in that moment. So don't let them suck you into their moment.
Well said, well said. Dr. Grimes, you have a thought on that?
Naja, I think you said it perfectly. I think I would just ditto everything Naja just said, not to personalize it and you know, try to find the gold amidst the trash. And you know, what Dane said too, I think, how do you coach someone to not be so hostile? I think we have to remember that we cannot change the other person. We can only change and work on ourselves. So trying to get out of that desire and wish and hope, I mean, it's a normal feeling to have. I wish that my ex would co-parent better with me. But at the end of the day, all we can do is, you know, control our own behavior and our own reactions and not try to control the other. And it's the same way when clients come into my office. I'd like to give tips and ideas, but if the client's not ready to receive or not on the motivated end, I don't force it because the client has to do the work as well.
Not that I'm necessarily advocating that people replicate what I'm about to talk about because it can have its own consequences, but somebody just shared with me recently, and it wasn't a client, but they shared with me that they got into a blended family situation and they each had kids from a prior relationship and they had a surprise baby themselves. And that surprise baby had the unforeseen consequence of being the focal point of love and enjoyment for everybody. And I thought, wow, that was pretty profound. Now, again, I'm not advocating that that's a prescription. You go make a baby to try to solve problems. But at the same time, I thought that was a pretty kind of good observation and reflection, is that if you can find something that combines interest and combines focuses across boundaries, and that may be a positive thing to do too. Dr. Grimes, your thoughts on that?
I think that if there's something that connects the whole family, the blended family, that's wonderful. And not something that, you know, you would take steps toward maybe after the first year. You know, even if it's just connecting with one of the stepchildren, knowing that, hey, we have this in common. I think that's great. I think you have to be mindful of a lot of pressure on the child of the new marriage, as long as it's not putting pressure on the child to be the, you know, primary source of love and connection, that's fine. I think if it's not too much pressure on that child, great.
All right. Ben, I think the common thing that you guys have found is fishing, right?
Between Chad and I and Asher, yes. I mean, but we do. I have 2 young children with my wife, and I can wholeheartedly agree that it has brought our family closer together. Nikki and Chad didn't decide to have kids again, and look, our story is a little ridiculous, but you know, that our kids now, my daughter's 7 and my son's 4, they call her Coco now, but that's Nikki. But they used to call her their stepmom because they wanted a stepmom, because they saw that Asher had a stepmom. So, but at the end of the day, you know, Nikki has taken to my children like their own, and she loves them. And God forbid if anything happens to Nadia and I, that Nikki and Chad have agreed to take our children.
That's awesome. We're getting ready to wind up. So first off, I'm going to offer the floor to any one of you if it's something that you'd like to offer in a closing comment. If I didn't get all your do's and don'ts, throw them on out there. Kristen, anything from you?
I guess one last thing is that the court does have the ability to make orders over 30 third parties, including new partners, spouses, step parents, when there is a safety concern or there is something related to that the court thinks should be restrained or just limited. So be aware of that. And that sometimes that comes with forcing third parties and new spouses to at transportation exchanges, or forcing everybody to go to the soccer game when they've only been together for a week. So just remember that the court does have the ability that can put a lot of restraint on your relationship building when there's a court order that your new girlfriend or wife can't be around the children during your custodial time or vice versa. So just keep that in mind.
All right. Yeah, well, I would throw out another. The most common court order in every court order is thou shalt not speak ill of the other parent in front of the child. And I will break it down to this one. And Naja, I gave you permission to use the word, you never did. Okay. But basically in Naja's word, and I use similar words, just, be a good person, take the high road. And even if somebody else isn't, okay. And don't be an ass. Okay. It's commonsensical that if you can.
Rule number one, that's the most, that's the golden rule.
So throw out everything else and just say, hey, just look in the mirror. And before you do or say something, think about how this is going to have an effect on your kid. Do you want to parade your new significant other that you've been in a relationship for a week? Do you want to bring him to the courthouse, really? Okay, think about what's going on. Think about everything. Think about the conflict. Think about your child, okay? Stephen, anything you'd like to add about the benefits? I do encourage all of you to look at all of our speakers' websites and content. They are all on the landing page for this webinar. And I will tell you, Nadia's got a ton of content out there. If you haven't been exposed to Talking Parents, it is a great resource. Yes, people are ordered to do it, and they're ordered to do it so they can learn to walk. So then once they figured it out and they understand that people are looking at it, they conduct themselves as though something is looking at it, and they learn to be better co-parents, better communicators. Ben, any closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think that, one anecdote I just want to bring up is about 26 years ago, I was suffering from addiction and alcoholism, and I went to my first meeting. And people were talking about the amount of time they had. They would have 30 days, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And quite frankly, I sat there and I thought they were full of crap, because there's no way at that time I could see anybody not drinking or doing drugs for 1 day, much less 30 or 40. So Nikki and I wrote this book for one simple reason, and that's just we wanted to give people hope that there was an easier, softer way. And if you had handed Nikki and I this book, 14, 15 years ago, we would have probably reacted the same way that I reacted in that first meeting, that there was no way. And yet 26 years later, I'm still sober. 14 years later, Nikki and I have a life that is beyond imagine. We don't have to walk around and live our life with this toxicity for the rest of our life. But most importantly, our son doesn't have to face the consequences of our decision.
And that's a great answer for a lot of you people in the audience that have come back and said, hey, my other parent either A, has an addiction problem, or they're just not a good person in my eyes, etc. You know what? There is hope, okay? And what we're talking about here, we're not talking about legal tactics and strategies unless being a good parent is a legal tactic and strategy. That's not what this is about, okay? It is a great strategy, by the way, okay? But at the same time, looking at Ben's situation and where they came from and where they are is a great, great, great opportunity for you to look at what your future for you and your children can be. And I think that's wonderful. Stephen, parting thoughts? Go ahead, Ben.
No, I just want to say one more last thing, that if you don't believe it, and you're sitting there going, this guy's full of crap, and there's no way that because of my ex or because of whatever, just believe that I believe that it can happen. Because if Nikki and I can do it, if you really know our personality, two type A alphas, hard-headed, stuck in our ways, but somehow we figured this out. So I know you think your situation's different, but it's not that unique in the sense of the bigger scheme or what Nikki and I went through or what millions of other people went through. So just keep on, trudging that road to happy destiny.
All right, Stephen, parting thoughts from you.
In terms of talking parents, I was going to say, do make sure that you have a plan for communication between you and the other parent. I think sometimes we take for granted that the other parent's going to communicate the way that we're planning to. So it's good to have that worked out ahead of time, whether you just discuss it, whether you're utilizing a service like Talking Parents or not, but to have an agreement about how you're going to communicate. And then just as a parent and as a family law lawyer, my biggest don't would be, don't make your life more complicated or more difficult than it has to be. Sometimes people look at me and say, well, man, you're a family law lawyer. Why are you putting up with this? Why are you putting up with that? Or you can do this or that. And the fact of coming in for years on end, and you see just a constant stream of people making their life more difficult than it has to be. And I've tried to learn from that, and I would encourage everyone else to think that way too.
All right, Stephen, thank you very much. Aaron, Dr. Grimes, your closing comments.
My closing comments would be, there are resources and help for you out there. And it doesn't take, months and months of therapy. It can be a couple sessions. It can be doing webinars and reaching out to like this, and then reaching out to other people in the community who are going through what you're going through. So it's not easy to be a single parent, a divorced parent, or to co-parent and to manage a blended family. There's resources and information out there that can make it a lot easier. So get the support when you need it.
And that is true. There is a lot of content available on the internet. 90% of it, I think, is on Naja's website. But there's a lot out there. Obviously, Ben's book is a great book. There is lots of good material. I'm a firm believer of incremental benefit, which means even if you get a book like Ben's or Naja's podcast or anything like that, and you get one valuable thought that you walk away with it, then it was worth the investment of time or the few dollars to get that thought. And so I encourage you to avail yourself of those resources. Kristen, any parting comments from you?
No, this was a phenomenal panel. I encourage everyone to get down the contact information and use it, because this really is a truly phenomenal panel. And remember, a wise woman told me a very long time ago, you can only take care of your side of the street. So focus on yourself and your children will follow.
Outstanding. Personally, I want to thank all the panel members. This was a wonderful experience for me doing this for the first time. And it was incredibly valuable content, I think, for all of our attendees to hear from all of you, from your perspectives. And again, I thank you all very, very, very much for participating today. And for the attendees, thank you so much for contributing to that with your valuable questions. I hope you got some value out of it. You're welcome to reach out by way of the landing page and communicate. And we look forward to doing another webinar in the future. Be on the lookout on the Custody Queens or HBP websites you see there on your screen for future webinars. We've previously done them on domestic violence and some other issues, and we'll be doing some more in the future. And hopefully we'll have some of these speakers back on the relevant topics. Thank you all very, very much.